Hey, fourth grade. Welcome to the first installment of our video lecture class on March 30th. We are going to start talking about poetry. That's what our unit is going to be based on for the whole last semester of school. And we're going to be reading it, we're going to be writing it, we're going to be taking it apart so you can better understand it. And I hope that you like poetry. We're going to be looking at a lot of different kinds of it. I am personally a giant fan. I really like poetry. Hold on, my music is very loud. Um, so I hope that you can find something that you like in what we're doing, and hope you enjoy it. So we are going to start here. Let me just get this down with our slide. We're going to go through the slide, then we're going to talk about the homework and how this is going to work this semester. So our first question is, what is it? Why do we study it? And this is something that we're going to do not every class, but some classes. It's called an admit slip. We'd be doing it in class if we were sitting in a class together, where you basically take out a piece of paper and write 3 to 5 sentences about what you think poetry is. You can stop, you can do it right now, or you can do it afterwards. It'll be in the assignment tab and it'll say refer to, the second slide in the video discussion. So, and it says you have 5 minutes. I made this before we were on lockdown. So you would have had a chance to do this in class and it would be the first thing that we do. But obviously, you can take longer than 5 minutes, but it shouldn't take you 5 minutes. I don't want this to be a giant project. I just want you to sit down, get a piece of paper, write 3 to 5 sentences about what you think poetry is, or just create a doc and send it to me either on PantherNet or on Google Classroom. So I just want to know what you think poetry is. And I would like for it to come from you and not from what we talk about during this. I want it to be your idea. So, um, poetry is, according to some people, and these are quotes from various people, a wild animal, a primal and primary form of language. Poetry is dancing, poetry is raw. All of these things are people that have said about poetry because trying to describe what poetry is a kind of nebulous thing. But if you notice that, you know, the things that the people are talking about in these quotes are fairly visceral, they're very um, it's a little bit hard to pin down, but they think that it's, a very true and honest form of speaking. So this comes from Greek. It's an ancient Greek word, poema, which means poem or posy. And a poem or posy is a thing created. So obviously, a thing created could be anything, but that is what a poem is called. And a poet in ancient Greek is called a maker of things. So I just wanted you to know the root word of that. So if we think about the origins of poetry, it is older than narrative prose. It's older than fiction. Poetry is something that began as an oral tradition. It was a way of passing stories down from families, things that they wanted to remember in their culture. People would memorize it. A lot of times it would be rhymed. Um, or unrhymed, but it was a way of conducting family stories down from one thing to another. I think I'm going to sneeze, and I hope not. It's going to be so loud. Sorry. Okay. Um, so, some people believe that it began as song, that people used to sing these traditions down from, the oldest, and then they would pass it on to the younger generation. Um, but, think about the mythologies that we've read, think about all the lore, family histories, and things like that. Um, but think about the ones that are still in existence today that are still used. Things like books of the Bible, like Song of Solomon. Think about that. Those are poems, psalms and things like that. And they talk about David being uh, that he wrote songs. And then if you think about the Odyssey and the Iliad, the two most famous Greek epic poems. That's what we base a lot of what we know about Greek mythology on, is from those extremely old, um, poems. And then we think about nursery rhymes that we know, like, without even having to really study them. Like, they are very old, they come from a long time ago. And the hymnals from church. If you guys, go to church, the hymns that we listen to, a lot of times they're very old, they were written a long time ago. And that's another form of poetry, is song. So, according to the encyclopedia, poetry is literature that evokes a concentrated, awareness of an experience or a specific emotional response through language chosen and arranged for its meaning, sound, and rhythm. So, if we break that down, it basically means that you know, poems focus on a moment in time. They focus on a specific emotion that's happening. Um, and when they talk about imaginative awareness, you know, we try to get hyper in a poem, they get hyper focused on what that feels like, what that means, not just what it means, like, we could write a poem about being sequestered with our family. And if we just talk about the daily grind of what you got up and did. I got up and I did my homework, and then I played some video games, and then I talked to my friends on the phone or whatever. That's not really a poem. But if you talk about what it means to you, you know, because of the emotion that's attached to it, if you talk about it because of what it means to you to be cooped up in a space with your family for a long period of time, if you really get to the heart of what it is, that's we're starting to get more into that poem aspect. Um, and a lot of times, the language that you choose is very specific. You don't just say something is great. You find the word in the thesaurus that resonates with you, that explains how great something is. And we choose that word very carefully. And then it can be arranged by meaning, sound, and rhythm. A lot of the poems that we read they may not even be rhymed, but they have a specific meter. They have a way that they sound when we read them aloud, and puts it makes it different than prose, because it's not just a narrative giving us the details. And prose can be very lyrical, but there's something different about a poem, and that's what this definition is talking about. So we talk about the differences in poetry and prose. It's really hard to define. I've got a couple of things here, but even with them being right here in front of me, they can swap. It's a really difficult thing to define what is different between poetry and prose. It's just kind of one of those things when you see it. Um, so poetry uses sound a lot of time. It uses literary devices, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, and it uses enjambment, which is a term that talks about basically at the end of a sentence or a verse, where you cut that end off, and we're going to talk about that. Enjambment is one of the things that can make a poem, and it can change the entire meaning of a poem. It's a really cool device. Um, so every aspect of a poem has structure. So what I mean by that is, even if you're not using a structured form like a sonnet or an ode or blank verse, or if you're using any of these specific things, sometimes it's just what you choose to how you choose to arrange the words. It has a in trying to talk about it, I'm not doing a very good job, but, there's a way that a poem looks and sounds that it just kinda like bells go off and you're like, "That's a poem." And generally it has line breaks. If you look at prose poems, obviously that doesn't have a line break, but we generally see it in, verse, stanza, line form, where we see that enjambment um, coming into play, and, it prose doesn't have that. Um, Prose, on the other hand, is narrative almost always. It tells a story, which doesn't mean a poem can't tell a story, but the goal of prose a lot of times is telling a story. It's getting the beginning, middle, and end out, whereas poetry can be more of that, you know, ethereal capture of a moment in time. Um, Prose has sentences and paragraphs and quotes and all of that stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have a metrical structure. I mean, it could, but then we're starting to get into poetical land, and we might have to wonder if it goes back in the other category. Um, and most of your everyday writing is prose. When I write an email, when I write a summary about a book, when I write a book review, when I, do all those different things, if I write a research paper or if I write fiction, that is going to be prose. So, like I said, it's hard to define what goes in which category, but we're trying. Oh, Samuel Taylor Coleridge learned this from his schoolmaster, and this may be a difficult thing to talk about, but we're going to try to break this down. I learned from him that poetry, even that of the loftiest and seemingly that of the wildest odes, had a logic of its own, as severe as that of science, and more difficult, because more subtle, more complex, and more dependent on more and more fugitive causes. In the truly great poets, he would say, there is a reason assignable, not only for every word, but for every position of every word. So his school teacher was talking about that, you know, the most complex of poems, the most out there poems, the ones that have structure, the ones that don't have structure. He's saying that it's still a severe, meaning like a difficult thing to do and he's saying, in his opinion, it's more difficult than science. That doesn't mean that you think that, and I've got it on my head. Doesn't mean that you think that. It means that that's what Samuel Taylor Coleridge's school teacher is saying. But the reason he's saying that is because it's extremely difficult to choose the right word. It's hard for us to do it in our daily life to get to say the right thing. But distilling down that emotion of a specific time, a specific feeling, and using exactly the words that you think are appropriate and that can evoke that feeling in other people, he's saying it's an extremely difficult thing to do, even more so than science. So, because if we sometimes when we look at poems, they're very short, they're very small, and you go, how can that be a poem, and how can that evoke that poetic feeling? But there's something about the arrangement of those words, those syllables, the exact choosing of the word and where you put it in the sentence can change everything. We look at some poems by William Carlos Williams and Ezra Pound, and we'll do that in the coming days, where they're extremely short but they are famous because of what they were able to do in that tiny space. So that's what he says that's what his school teacher said. So, okay. And this is another way of kind of talking about it is anyone with a watch can tell you what time it is, but who can tell you what is time? It's a way of saying, you can sit there and tell me what it's like to be on lockdown with your family, um, by describing what you guys did during the day. But it is not until you start talking about the nuts and bolts of how you feel about it, how they feel about it, what it means for it to be happening within a very anxious world that we're living in right now. And you're starting to get into what is poetry versus what is prose. Um, so poetry is moving. These are some more quotes from people. It's a snapshot of a moment or feeling. We talked about that. It can be a history. We talked about how a lot of times we get some of the information we know from ancient times because of the historical aspect of what they've decided to pass down. And a lot of times it's rhythmic. We're going to find that sound and meter and all that come into play. Um, and and these are just things that I came up with that I'm hoping to share with you. Like you may find some of this poetry boring. You may think that when we start doing sonnets, you may be like, "Oh, this is terrible." It may be extremely confusing because of the language that they are using. It may make you feel things that you don't necessarily like. I mean, like they can be really evocative, and it may make you sad or it may make you mad because you may not like it, and that's another one that may make you sad. But I really hope that you're going to play along with me, because you may actually like it. You may find yourself thinking that the structure of poetry is a good one. It's a valid one. You may find some that speak to you, and it may seem daunting. It may seem like a hard thing to do, but I know that you can do this too. Like you guys are have spent the entire year writing in one form or another, and this is just another form, and I really think you can do it. Um, and you may find a lot that you don't like, but I'm hoping that you can find some that do speak to you. That's kind of my goal. Is if you may not be a poetry person, but you find one or two that actually speak to you. That's the goal. So, is poetry as a form important? Why or why not? This would be the point in class where we talk to each other, but you're not here. So, I personally am a giant fan of poetry. I think as a form, it's very important um, because of what it does for the writer and what it does for the person that reads it. Um, I believe that being able to sit down and write poetry is an exercise in self reflection, and reflection on society, and reflection on our lives as a whole. And I think that being able to, and I've used this word several times today already, and I don't mean to continue to use the same word, but I think that you can distill down a moment in time, a feeling that, we may all have the feeling of love or grief or excitement, but taking it and turning it into something that is edible, that everyone can consume is a difficult thing to do, and it's a wonderful exercise, both emotionally and intellectually. So I think it's an extremely important form. I think that it's something that we've done as humans for a very long time. So I hope that it doesn't go away because I think that it's very useful. So instead of a class discussion, maybe think about whether or not you think it's an important as a form. So this would be where we wax poetic about that. Ha ha ha. So here are forms that we will study. Forms There's a number of different types of poetry. We're not going to get into all of these and like what everyone means and break down the form, but we're going to see poems represented in all of these. So haiku, I know you guys did that last year with Miss Dare. You know haiku. Sonnet, it's going to be a big one this semester, and it's going to be a hard one. We're going to save it for the end because I want us to be exposed to a couple different other pieces of the puzzle before we get to that. But you are going to write a sonnet, and you are going to be amazing at it, and I know that you can do it. Free verse, it's a very popular form. It's a very modern form. Blank verse means that it has meter, but it doesn't necessarily rhyme. I believe William Blake is going to be who we're going to talk about that. Villanelles, Ars Poetica. Ars Poetica is going to be one of the first forms that we talk about. Elegy means that you're writing a song about the death of something or someone. An ode, my personal favorite, and we are going to write an ode because I just love them. I think they are the purest of poems. To write about why you love something so much and write an ode to it is just there's something so pure about it. Epistolary, which means a letter form. So basically, like you're writing a letter to somebody or something, but in a poem form. Pastoral generally has to do with, sheep, rural life, shepherds, and things like that. There's even anti-pastoral poems. There are prose poems, which looks like fiction on the outset, kind of has a structure with fiction, but it's really a poem. Acrostics means the first letter. We'll spell something out, and you write a line for each one. I think you guys have probably seen those before, and I think we wrote one. Uh, Halloween, we wrote an acrostic poem. A nocturne, a ballad, and a persona poem. And we may even do a bio poem, which I think is kind of similar to a persona poem, but that's going to be your biography kind of thing. So now we're going to dissect poetry. So these are how do we analyze our poems for better understanding? So basically, we're going to read the poem. We're going to do this every single time we read a poem. This is our job. We're going to take it apart. We're not just going to read a poem and be done with it. We're going to have to do this because we have to analyze a poem. So number two, we're going to identify the words you do not know. this may be the most important thing you do in the poem other than read it. And I'm going to give you a list of them, but every single time you're going to have to look them up. We're going to have to define them. And the reason that we do that is because I'm so sorry. Allergies and all the pollen outside. Okay, so we cannot know the meaning of a poem if there are 15 words in a poem that we do not understand. The first one that we're going to look at for homework, it is the short, I mean, it's a three stanza poem, but there are words in there that if you don't look them up, you have absolutely no idea what it means. And it's just about toads. So this very important. I cannot express this enough that you have your and I hate that your dictionary is sitting in the classroom right now, but I'm sure you can find it online or use one that you have at home. But we can use that vocabulary.com subscription that you have as a great dictionary. It tells you the root word and all that stuff, but we have to look these words up. It's going to be part of the homework. So it says look them up and write a definition below. You will have that. You obviously don't need to write it down because we're doing this together right now. Identify who the speaker is. If you can't tell, then obviously say, I don't know who this is, or it's just the poet, or imagine who it is. Sometimes it's very clear. It's an old guy talking to whomever, it's a young girl, it's a priest, it's whatever, it's a shepherd. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes you have to kind of use your imagination. What is the main theme of the poem? You guys are great about this. We've done a lot of literature webs, and your ability to grasp what the theme of the poem is, you're all great at it. So use it in this. So it basically means what it's about. If it's about love, it's about grief, it's about, I mean, the overarching theme that is happening in this poem. And when was this poem written? I have a whole bunch of informational sides about the person that wrote it. So you can look that up or you can look it up online, whatever is easiest for you. But I want you to kind of look at the author's biography so you know a little bit about them. What form is this poem? As we start to go through the various types of poems, um, if it's a free verse, say this is a free verse poem because I don't see any meter, I don't see any rhythm. This is kind of a free form. That's that. If it's called Ode to Something, you're going to know that it's an ode. What is going on in this poem? Give me a general plot. Give me a general overview about what that is. Is there a meter or a rhyme scheme? We're going to talk more about what that means today, and then we're going to get much deeper into it. We're going to talk about iambic pentameter. We're getting into the down and dirty with poetry. Okay. And do you notice any poetic devices? You guys went over a lot of sound devices last year, and maybe even some in figurative language as well. I want to know about metaphor and simile and consonants and assonance and alliteration and imagery. And I mean, any of those things that when you see it, you're like, I see them doing a little trick. It means they're using a trick in this poem. And I want you to list it out. Okay. And then 11, ultimately, did you like it? Do you like this poem? If you just say no, it doesn't count. You have to tell me why. Give me a why. I want to know why you don't like it. If you do like it, tell me why. And it can still be a one sentence answer. Just give me a reason. Remember, I always want to know why, because that means you have a sound argument. Okay. It goes back to the hamburger paragraph. Okay. So have a dictionary on hand. It could be online. Because and I put this here, important things to remember, each word has a nuance. It differentiates it from using a different word. Okay. And then I want you to complete a learning log after you do this dissection. It's going to be 10 lines. Write it on loose leaf paper, take a picture of it and turn it in, or do 10 complete sentences on it in a doc. I'm going to go over what it means to do a learning log. This is to help you, and it's to help me. It's to show me that you are taking more than 2 seconds just to read this poem, but it's also helping you reflect on it. One of the things that we do as we get older and we're in school is we start taking notes about things. You guys don't necessarily take notes in class when I do lecture. It's something that you're going to do. It's something that you're going to be required to do. This is kind of like that in the sense that after you read the poem, I want you to reflect on it. You've dissected it. I want you to tell me what you've learned from the poem, and we'll go over there's different types of learning logs that you can do. This is just to make it stick, okay? It's just like when you're memorizing something and you go over it in different ways. You write it out and you say it aloud and you recite it to somebody else, and it's this is just for better understanding, okay? Because they may seem like little tiny pieces of verse, but you can get a lot out of them, both emotionally and intellectually, okay? And then it says, come to class ready to talk about the poem if we have a Zoom class scheduled. We're going to try to get Zoom going. I know you guys have a lot to do, and you're probably going to Zoom with Miss Maplewitz. I don't want to get in the way of all of that, but at some point we're going to do that. So we are going to look about a poem about books. It's called Books Fall Open, and it's by David McCord, and we're going to talk about what this poem means. And I have a visitor. Wait. River's here with me. So I'm going to read this poem to you. Books fall open, you fall in, delighted where you've never been. Hear voices not once heard before, reach world on world through door on door. Find unexpected keys to things locked up beyond imaginings. What might you be, perhaps become, because one book is somewhere, some wise delver, wisdom, wit, and wherewithal has written it. Two books will venture dare you out, whisper secrets, maybe shout. Across the gloom to you in need who hanker for a book to read. I mean, this poem is just about the process of reading. It's all it's about, and why it can be magical and why it can be fun, um, and what is special about it. So, if you notice, the first thing that I have done is I have identified the words that we may not necessarily know exactly what it means. So, the first one here is delighted. Delighted where you've never been, which means feeling you're showing great pleasure. Oh, no, go back. 1 second, wrong slide. So it's important that we know that it means that exact thing. Unexpected, I think most of you probably know what unexpected means. It's regarded as unlikely to happen, but it's something that we are going to define anyway because I want to make sure that we know. So it means that there's something that we don't think that we're going to necessarily find behind that door, but we find it anyway. Another one that I've defined here is imaginings. Locked up beyond imaginings, that's thoughts or fantasies. It's something that, we might think in our mind that might happen. We may not necessarily, know that it will, and it's a thought or an imagining. Um, some wise delver into wisdom. Um, we've got delvings done here, which means a delver is a person that would do it. But it means to carry on or extensive research for data. So somebody that's looking for information, right? Some wise person who's looking for information. He's delving into wisdom, wit, and wherewithal. What is wherewithal? Especially in this particular poem, what does it mean? It means money or other means needed for a particular purpose. Like when you have the wherewithal to do something, it means you have the ability, the purpose, the stuff that it takes to make it happen. So, and the last two are gloom and hanker. Across the gloom, partial or total darkness. And then hanker is a strong desire to do something. So if you have a hankering for a cheeseburger, it means you really, really, really want to eat a cheeseburger. This is a person who has a hanker for a book to read. So he really, or she really wants a burger. I mean, not a burger, a book to read. What am I saying? Okay. So we're talking about rhyme scheme really quickly here because this one in particular has a rhyme. And it's an A B. Like we're basically every other line rhymes with itself. So if you look here, books fall open, you fall in, delighted where you've never been. So been and in, so we're marking it A. So then we've got your voices not once heard before, reach world on world through door on door. So we've got door and before, so we're going to mark it BB because they are rhyming with each other. Now, if this were to go back here and rhyme with in, say instead of in bin, say it said sin. I don't know. If that said sin there, then this would be A instead of C because it would be going back up here, but it doesn't. it starts a new rhyme scheme with things and imaginings. So as things and imaginings, we start see. And it continues on that way where we've got become, some, and if you notice, this is a funky rhyme because it says, "What might you be, perhaps become, because one book is somewhere, some wise delver into wisdom wit." It's a weird thing. This is called enjambment. We're going to talk about this because he made that rhyme happen because he put it there. We're having some allergy difficulties. So we've got wit, it, out, shout, and need, and read. So if you notice, we go all the way through the G lettering of rhyme scheme. This girl's about to slide in the floor. Not that. Pressing all the wrong buttons. So here's your exit slip. I want you to write 3 to 5 sentences on why you think the form of poetry is important. I know you don't have to have 5 minutes because we're not in class, but I want you to create a doc. I want you to write a piece of paper out on why you think the form of poetry is important. If you can use the things that I have told you, adios, child. Or you can come up with your own reason why you think it's important. I would appreciate that. That would be great. Oh, goodness. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to pause that and we're going to talk about the learning log. And I'm going to pause this video and I'll be back. Hi. All right. Somebody wanted to be here while we do learning logs. So we are going to go into our class and I'm going to pull up the learning log. Okay, I'm here. Hello, 4th grade. Go to topics. Yoo-hoo. So we go to topics. Here, poetry. This is our intro to poetry topic. So if you notice, I've got our assignments here. No way you're going to be able to pay attention to me while I do this. So we've got our intro to poetry unit, our slides, which is our poet biographies are going to be here. Hey, baby, you said you were going to not do this. All right. How do I write a learning log? There goes my husband taking the dog out. Learning logs. Okay, so I took this from a Writer's Ink book, which I think you guys may be getting a copy of this next year. It is a magical book, and I'm telling you, it has all the information about English language that you will ever need. And you can use it in middle school, high school, college. I still have mine. It is a magical book. Magical. So this is what you're required to do when we have a poem, okay? You're going to read the poem, you're going to dissect the poem, and then you're going to write a 10-sentence learning log, okay? It can be where you write it out, you can do it in a doc, it doesn't matter. One of them is right here. You can write a summary of your experience. You can write a summary of the things that I have told you that day in class, the video. You can do a summary of the video. And you can give your opinions about what you agree with or why. Or you can write a summary of what I would kind of prefer you to do, maybe, of the poem itself. Okay, what the poem means, what information you found valuable in the poem, why you liked it, why you didn't like it. Do not do that. Okay, you can personalize new ideas and concepts. You can talk about how this relates to something you may know. I mean, that's going to be harder to do in a poem, but you can use a personal anecdote if you want. You can write about what you still want to know. If there's something in it that if you don't quite get the poem and you want to talk about more information that you need to look up, that's perfectly fine. If you want to discuss this with a particular audience and you want to figure out what it all means, you can kind of imagine that you are talking to somebody. Hey, babe, come on, hold on with me. You can. Okay, so it says express ideas and information in pictures, charts, and maps. I don't think we're going to do that because you don't really, unless you make a really amazing map, you could make a map of the poem, I suppose, like you would find in Lord of the Rings or something, but I don't know that will apply to what you're going to do. It says start a glossary of important and interesting vocabulary words and use these in your log entries. You could do that, but we kind of are already doing that already. you can argue for or against a topic. If this talks about something that is particularly, pro or con or something, you can kind of talk about why you believe that that is true or why you believe that it is not true. Or you can write about how you were doing in a certain class, meaning like if this is difficult for you to understand or you really like it, or if you want to give me an opinion piece about the particular poem or poems in general, you can do that as well. But the one that's probably going to be the easiest for you is the summary. You give me a summary about what it means. And then I've got an example. Let me pull that up so I can show you what the example looks like. And granted, this is for one that is a science-based one. So this is a response to a science article, right? And then this is a response to a chemistry lecture. But you can pull these up and see how the person talked about the information that they got from the lecture in the chemistry one, or talk about the information they got from the science article. You can do that where you can combine what we learned in the video diary or entry discussion, whatever you want to call this thing that I'm doing with you now. Or you can talk about the poem, or you can smash them together. I just need 10 sentences. It doesn't have to be structured like a hamburger paragraph, but it can't. Shoot you a picture of a potato for me. Thank you. So hopefully that helps in how it. Hopefully that will help you just kind of go over. We'll do this each night with each poem, and some will probably be easier than others to dissect and then do a learning log. The first one that you're going to do is called Afternoon of a Toad. It's by the same guy that we just did, David McCord. And I want you to, in your learning log, you can talk about why a guy would write a poem about a toad. I mean, it's it you know, it's just about a toad and what he's doing in the afternoon. That's it. But there's a reason why it's important. There's a reason why it's a poem, and there's a reason why I'm making you read it, and not because toads are my favorite creature. Um, so just think about it along those lines when you're doing learning log. And like I said, write it out, type it out, send it into Google Classroom or send it into PantherNet. I know that I'm posting things on both PantherNet and Google. This class has started using Google Classroom, but they also, some of them use PantherNet. If it is confusing, please let me know. I'm trying to put the exact same information on. It's a little bit better organized here on PantherNet because of the structure of PantherNet. So it might be easier for you to find your info here, and then if you want to turn around and do it on Google Docs, you can do it on Google Docs. Or if you just want to email it to me, that's fine. But listen, don't let this work pile up on you. We would be doing it in class, a lot of this in class. And I know it's difficult to get situated at home, but just try to not let it pile up on you, okay? I want you guys to get good grades. I want everyone to get their assignments turned in. And I really hope that, we can get together soon where we have an in-class meeting. At the very least, you can send me video responses on Flipgrid if you're interested in that. I know we did that and I had a couple responses. I think that would be fun. We could all see each other on video and it could be on your own time because I know it's difficult to get to a device, depending on how many kids are in your house and how many devices you have or what your schedule is. So, anyway, have a great day and hope that this video was helpful. So, I look forward to your first learning logs and everything. See you guys.